All right, so I'm at the ghost town of Kelso, or the Kelso Depot. Watch my other video about that. Today we're headed out to the Kelso Dunes, right out here.
Flat tire?
Well, here's a turnoff to Kelso Dunes from Kelbaker. It's a 3-mile road up to the trailhead, and it's another dirt road. So don't do it in the rain. But today, it's a super sunny day, so we're gonna do it. Here are the dunes up here. All right, so we finally made it to Kelso Dunes in our citation here. And here's the road. It's 3 miles from Kelbaker. And it's all gravelly, tons of potholes, so just be careful. Don't get a flat tire out here because there's no cell service. And here are dunes out here. Beautiful. So I'll tell you about the dunes and all the cool plants, animals, little beetles and lizards that live here and nowhere else in the entire world. And hopefully we'll stumble across a few of them out in these dunes here. Beautiful. So this is nice. They got some restrooms here. Little trash area. Creosote bush. Little information center about our dunes. But we don't need that. Of course not. Here's the trailhead. 1.5 miles up to the top. And 1.5 miles back. Yeah, we got some ants here. Some red ants. Here, right up, we have a little desert tortoise hole underneath that creosote bush. So he's been hibernating during the winter, and he had to come out soon. So who lives in these dunes? Well, not a lot, but we do have some critters and different plants. And the easiest ones to recognize are the poisonous sidewinder snakes and the Mojave fringe-toed lizard. And the fringe-toed lizard literally swims under the sand. We also have kit foxes, kangaroo rats, jackrabbits, coyotes, and desert tortoises. So the desert floor underneath the sand dunes, this is typical of all Mojave. We have our creosote bushes, Valeria tridentata. Got our burrow bushes, that's Ambrosia domosa. Okay, here we have a pencil cactus from the genus Cylindropuntia. Alright. And that's pretty much all you find at the base of the sand dunes. The trail here is just easy sand, walking up until it gets a little harder when you get to the soft sand. There's always evidence here of different animals. There's a little scat here from somebody, or maybe it's a dog. Right. And always look underneath your creosote bushes for little critters that might live under here, like a rodent. Okay. Wood rat, some other rodents. All right, hey, check out this guy. He's hiding behind this bush here. This is a desert iguana. There he goes. Dipsosaurus dorsalis. Let's chase him around a little bit. See if he stops for us. All right, well, he's in here somewhere now. I think he went in one of these little holes here, little burrows. How about that? Wow. That's our desert iguana in Kelso Dunes. That's fantastic. So when you walk up the dunes here, as you get closer, you come across this grass here. This guy up here. This is called big galleta grass. Hilaria rigida. And you just go by the name of Pleurophis rigida, but now it's just called big galleta. It's a very common perennial grass-like herb native to Southern California, and it's also found elsewhere in the southern United States. Usually find it around creosote bushes and Joshua tree woodlands, but also in our sand dunes like we have here. Now it's a lot more common than its cousin, the simple galleta grass. Instead, this is the big galleta grass. And this plant is pretty unusual. So most grasses have hollow stems, all right? But our big galleta has a solid stem here. See that? All right. And it's also very shrubby. It's very bushy. The stems are fuzzy. They're woolly, coarse. They're mostly erect. They get about 3.5 feet high. And the leaf blades, if we find a leaf on one of these guys, there we go. All right. So the leaf blades here, okay, they're grayish to blue-gray in color. They're coarse and firm, and they're pretty wide here, and they're very, very straight. Now this plant primarily reproduces by rhizomes from the shallow radiant roots that come out of this plant, and they shoot out, and then they come upward, and it really helps them secure themselves in the sand so they don't blow away. So our big galleta, of course, it's very drought tolerant, and it's super fast growing after the winter rains or the summer monsoons, and they're said to be more effective than almost any other desert plant at extracting water from the soil during times of drought. And these plants are super important since they're essential at stabilizing these dunes. Perhaps the most valuable forage grass out here in the desert. Hey, check out this big den here underneath our big galleta grass. Who's in there? Besides a giant rattlesnake, sidewinder. Could be a kit fox, so for all I know, but I think it's a giant desert tortoise who lives here in the little shelter of our big galleta. Here's another look at the den here, the burrow. Wow. So we're going to walk up to the top of the dunes, and I'll tell you all about this place. The trail is about a 3-mile round trip to the top. The tallest dune rises 650 feet above the surrounding terrain. So this is the largest field of aeolian sand deposits in the Mojave Desert. It covers about 45 square miles. And these are migrating dunes. They're vegetatively stabilized dunes, sand sheets, and also sand ramps. Here's an example of a creosote ring. All right, so it used to be in the middle here, right in the middle, was a mother plant. She sent out her rhizomes underground to make new plants. And they grow in a ring here, okay? And those plants will then send out more to make a bigger ring. And eventually these rings can be 20, 30 feet in diameter and up to 10,000 years old. Here's another one I'll show you. See, here we got 3 of them kind of spread out. Okay. Here's a real good one over here. Our creosote rings. Well, here's one here. See how it's kind of like a ring? And here's a nice one here. All right. Here's a pretty little ring. Probably not very old. Anyway, that's how these guys propagate and grow out here in the desert. So this little plant you see all over the place. All right, here, over here, over here. And this is a desert sand verbena. Ambernia villosa, or villosa, also called a chaparral sand verbena. All right, this guy's a member of what's called the 4 o'clock family. because the flowers, they typically open around 4 in the afternoon, then they stay open until sunrise. They're great at attracting afternoon hummingbirds and nocturnal pollinators. This guy thrives in the driest, sandiest desert locations. So you find them in other deserts like of the southwest down in northern Mexico, usually around creosote bushes and coastal sage. And they bloom from February through July. So after it rains, these plants will sprout up and they'll carpet the sand for miles and miles. Wow. All right, check out this guy over here that we found. This is a Mojave fringe-toed lizard, Uma scoparia. He's a medium-sized lizard, about 7 inches long, flat body, really smooth skin. He's typically white or grayish, depending on what he's blending in with. Has black spots on his back, dark bands on his tail, and dark blotches on the sides of its belly. If you flip him over, on the bottom of his throat, he's got 3 crescent-shaped markings that are very characteristic of the species. So he lives in Southern California and Arizona, in the sand dunes, dry lake beds, desert washes, and hillsides. And you find a lot of them in Death Valley and out here on Kelso Dunes. He's called fringe-tailed due to his scaly hind toes. And his scaly hind toes, they resemble snowshoes that help him from sinking into the sand. So where does all this sand come from? Well, I'm glad you asked. Kelso Dunes is part of a much larger sand transport system, which also includes the nearby Devil's Playground from the Mojave River sink near Afton Canyon, and then hit these nearby Providence and Granite Mountain ranges, and then deposited the sand. But today, no new sand accumulates here. This plant here is desert holly, Atriplex hymenelytra. He gets his name because he looks like European holly. He's very common in these harsh, dry environments, like in the sand dunes here, also at Amboy Crater. So Kelso Dunes here, it's not just one dune though. There are 5 stacked dunes on top of each other during different periods over the last 25,000 years. So during super dry periods, the vegetation dies off, and then the sand is allowed to blow in. And the eastern part of Kelso Dunes was formed when Soda Lake and Silver Lake dried up into their current playas. But once the sand gets displaced, then new vegetation comes in to secure it from blowing away. These dunes are notable for the phenomenon known as singing sand or booming dunes. So you climb to the top of the dunes and you slide down, and this creates a low frequency rumble that can be both felt and heard. Hence the name singing sand or booming dunes. It's a lot more pronounced when the dunes are super dry though. So the dunes are comprised mostly of light-colored quartz and feldspar, most likely eroded from the San Bernardino Mountains to the southwest. Magnetite and amphibole can also be found, usually accumulating on the crest of the dunes. Now there are at least 10 different species of insects, like the Kelso giant sand treader cricket, the Kelso Jerusalem cricket, he's also known as a Kelso dune cricket, the Raphiomydes tarsalis, which is a very rare Midas fly, and the Kelso shieldback katydid. There's a solitary bee, he's called a Hapropoda pallida, also called a white-faced bee, and he's the first native bee to emerge in the spring on the Kelso Dunes. He relies on the early morning blooming Borrego milkvetch flowers. We also have a blister beetle, and a fuzzy beetle, and even a June beetle. These tiny little holes here, I bet that's where our beetles live. All right, so here's our Borrego milk vetch. You start to see them the higher you get up in the dunes. And over here, check them out. Here's another one of our Mojave French-toed lizards here. There he is. Oh, he's burrowing. That is so cool. Look at that. He's burrowing, he's hiding from me. So this plant here, this is called Borrego milk vetch. Astragalus lentiginosus. He's also known as a spotted loco weed or a freckled milk vetch. This little bee up here. Wow. Anyway, so our milk vetch, it gets its name from the early Greeks who believed this genus promoted milk production in goats. Now it's native to western United States from the Great Basin, west of the Rockies, south to Mexico, and north up to British Columbia. It's very common, but it comes in lots of different varieties. So the stems, they can be drooping or erect. Oh, look at this guy. There he goes. That's our Mojave French-toed lizard. Wow. Anyway, back here. So the stems can be drooping or erect. They're woolly, okay, but they're hairless. And the leaves up here, these leaves can be up to 6 inches long. They're pretty short right here. Okay, but they're, oh. So the leaves, so this here, this is actually a leaf, it's not a stem. They could be 6 inches long, okay? These little guys, they're called leaflets, okay? And they work themselves up this leaf that looks like a stem. And the flowers, you got this inflorescence of flowers at the top. They hold about 50 pea-like little flowers. They may be purplish to whitish, or a mixture of the two. This guy is one of the first bloomers of the desert, and he's a super important host to insects that come out early, like the bees. And one of the first bees to arrive here, there's a bee over here, okay, is called a Haproboda pallida. And he's an individual kind of solitary bee, you find out here. But overall, there's about 689 different species of birds in the Mojave Desert. And it makes this one of the most diverse habitats in all of North America. And the bee's life cycle is synchronized with this Borrego milk vetch. There's also a beetle you might find here called the blister beetle. And he feeds exclusively on our Borrego milk vetch. But you only find him in the wintertime. So we're not going to find him now. All right, this little bee, here we go. This little bee we see flying around here on our Borrego milk vetch, this is a Hapropoda padilla. He's commonly known as a white-faced bee. He's sort of like a bumblebee, but bumblebees, they come from the genus Bombus, or Bumbus. This guy's very common in central North America. He's the first solitary bee to come out here, usually around March, and he relies on these blooming Borrego milk vetch flowers. He also comes from a tribe of bees called anthrophorines, or anthophorenes, which means they're digger bees. They make their nest in the soil along with a large aggregation of other bees. Look how barren this place is. Absolutely fantastic. Still got our big wad of grass. The little plants growing up here. See who else we can find. So as you walk up the dunes, just keep your eyes open for little crickets and beetles. And there are lizards, anything that's moving up here. Just take a second, see if you can find out what it is. All right, so we're about a third of the way up the hill from down here. We're headed up here, I think to the top. But let's take a real close look at the sand here. Okay. So as you get higher up the sand dune, you'll notice the color of the sand, right? It gets a little darker. There's a little ant. All right, here we have another fringe-toed lizard. Let's see here. Does anything exciting for us? All right. His little hind feet, you can see, got little fringes on them. Let's help him glide through the sand. Let's see if I can watch him glide through the sand. Oh, look at that. Wow. Okay. All right, let's see if we get him running at 23 miles an hour here. Go, baby. Clock you at 23. There he goes. Come on. All right. Our fringe-toed lizard. Wow. All right, so we're almost there. About 3/4 of the way from our car down here somewhere. But here's the hard part. Okay, getting up the steep part of the dune, the highest point, right up here. Hey, so this is pretty interesting. All right, see these circles going around? This grass, longer. So the wind blows the grass blades around in a circle, right? And it makes these little circle patterns. Here we got a beautiful little circle here. Perfect circle with one blade of grass. Wow, couldn't get better than that. So here's one of the peaks of the sand dune here, where people walk. They walk up here because these little avalanches, you see, just like a snow avalanche. The sand, the grains of sand will pile up, come down here, and that's theoretically what causes this booming sand, or the singing sand. This is a little example. But if you do it up on top of the hill, you should get a better effect. These guys over here, they're gonna try it. Maybe we'll be here long enough to see if we get some booming sand. All right. Almost there. So the last part of the dunes is the hardest because look how soft the sand is when I'm walking. You're just sinking in. See? All right. So we made it this far. So we got to go to the end. Whew. Here's the parking area way down there. The RV's down there as well. So we like that path up here. Here's Uncle Casey. He'll make it. We're almost there. The hardest part's always the last 10 steps. My dad always said. All right. We'll get there. All right, made it to the top of Kelso Dunes. Mile and a half felt like 10 miles. Wow, it's Uncle Casey, he didn't make it. Here's a trail way down here, hike across the desert, all the sand. That's beautiful. Here's actually the tippy top. There's guys up there, so it won't bother them. Look at this beautiful desert. And you have the slide here. We'll watch them go down, wipe out. Out here, that's the ghost town of Kelso, where we came from. All right, so that's the end of our Kelso Dunes video. Unless I find like a Jerusalem cricket, or some other strange little creature. Place is great. Okay, Kelso Dunes. Check that off the bucket list. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.